"Sir, you've been flagged as a discrepant passenger." Those were the first words Dr. Isaiah Grant heard the moment he stepped onto Horizon Star Airlines Flight 217. He wasn't loud, he wasn't late, and he wasn't mistaken. His boarding pass clearly read 6A First Class. But that didn't matter to flight attendant Claire Donovan, who barely glanced up from her tablet. Isaiah, one of the world's foremost AI entrepreneurs, stood calmly in a crisp navy suit, an image of dignity in the face of rising tension. Nearby, a white businessman in a pinstripe suit marched down the aisle and pointed, "That's my seat." Moments later, Isaiah's phone was knocked from his hand. No apology, no correction, just silence from the crew and a cold instruction step off the plane. He didn't move, because in exactly 10 minutes, the man they were trying to erase would own everything above and beneath them. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Claire Donovan didn't blink as she blocked the aisle, holding her tablet like a shield. "Sir, I need you to step aside for further screening." Isaiah Grant didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply held up his boarding pass, letting the bold black letters speak for him, 6A, First Class. His voice, smooth as polished steel, replied, "TSA cleared me. Your system's the issue, not mine." But she wasn't listening. Behind him, the low rumble of the cabin settled into unease. Buckles clicked. Eyes darted. Whispers passed like contraband. A few passengers peeked over seats. None spoke. None asked why a well-dressed black man was being challenged so publicly. Victor Crane appeared then, white mid-40s, with the swagger of a man who owned everything he looked at. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Instead, he sneered and shoved a folded piece of paper toward Claire. "That's my seat," he said, pointing to 6A. "Make him move." Isaiah turned slightly. "What does your boarding pass say?" Victor didn't answer. Instead, he slapped Isaiah's phone off the tray table. It hit the carpet with a loud, sick crack before sliding beneath another seat. Gasps rippled across the cabin. Still, Claire said nothing to Victor. Instead, she turned to Isaiah. "Sir, exit the aircraft now." Isaiah didn't flinch, his spine straight, his hands calm. "Unless you can prove this seat isn't mine," he said evenly, "I'm not going anywhere." Claire's tone turned sharp. "You're not in our system. Your name isn't confirmed." From seat 5C, Aisha Patel, a composed woman in a slate gray suit, looked up from her tablet. Legal counsel, loyal advisor, and Isaiah's shield when silence wasn't enough. "We're ready," she whispered. Isaiah tapped his smartwatch once. "Nadia," he said softly, "begin protocol." Across Miami, in a gleaming office tower, Nadia Cole's monitors came alive. Understood. Escalation initiated. Claire barely noticed. She turned to the passengers, offering a rehearsed smile. "We're experiencing a brief delay due to a seating discrepancy. Please remain patient." But patience was already fraying. Isaiah returned to seat 6A, picked up his phone, and leaned back, staring into the distance. This wasn't the first time he'd been underestimated. In 2010, a white supervisor had dismissed his breakthrough AI model as instinct-driven and hard to validate. That data became the cornerstone of quantum core solutions. He'd built empires off being doubted. Now they were doubting him again. On a plane he'd helped fund. On an airline whose board he'd already been circling for months. Victor leaned in again. "My name's on the list. Yours isn't." Aisha tapped her screen. "Isaiah, I'm drafting formal notice. Horizon Star's counsel will receive it in under 90 seconds. "Send it," Isaiah said. 2 rows back, a travel vlogger named Javier Morales whispered into his livestream mic, "You're watching Horizon Star. Target a black CEO in real time." His audience began to grow. Victor dropped a note onto Isaiah's tray table, "Leave first class." Isaiah held it up without a word, showed it to Claire. "Is this your policy now?" he asked. She didn't respond, but her silence screamed. Aisha's phone buzzed. "Notice sent. Legal timestamp attached. Board notified." Claire folded her arms. "You're causing a disruption." Isaiah didn't blink. "You're causing a disaster." Victor leaned back smugly, but the mood had shifted. Passengers were filming. Whispers turned to murmurs. One woman in 7B mouthed, "I've seen him on Forbes." Suddenly, the cabin lights dimmed slightly. The digital tremor had begun. Javier's livestream jumped to 15,000 viewers, then 20,000. Claire's tone remained flat. "Sir, you're delaying takeoff," Aisha replied, "with a confirmed pass while your crew backs a man who committed battery." Then Claire did something calculated. She reached for Isaiah's briefcase on seat 6B. "You left this unattended. FAA regulations allow us to remove it." She walked it to the galley. The audience watching now was global. Javier's camera didn't miss a frame. "You're seeing this, right?" he said. "They're confiscating his property, even though it was beside him the whole time." Isaiah didn't stop her. He didn't need to. He turned to Aisha. "What's the share bid status prepped?" "Market entry in under 5 minutes," she replied. "Do it." Across the cabin, an older woman whispered to her husband, "Why are they doing this to him?" The answer hung in the silence. Because they thought they could. Because they thought he wouldn't fight back. Because they didn't know who he was. While Claire returned to her post, Isaiah sat quietly, one leg crossed over the other, his fingers resting on the armrest of a seat that no longer responded to his touch. The controls had been disabled. The reading light above him had gone dark. His screen was frozen on the safety procedures, like a child punished for disobedience. He didn't reach for help. He reached for data. "Nadia," he said calmly into his smartwatch, "what's the current market volume on Horizon Star stock?" A pause, then her voice returned, crystal clear. "Volume is rising. Word is leaking. Social traffic is already pushing analytics into the red." "Good," Isaiah murmured. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't posturing. He was playing a different game altogether. Victor Crane, now seated with smug entitlement in seat 6B, folded his arms. "You tech types think you own the world. All brains, no legacy. I come from capital. Real money." Isaiah didn't even turn his head. "Then you should know capital has no loyalty. It follows pressure. And right now, you're standing under a floodlight." Across the aisle, Aisha Patel's fingers danced across her tablet. Her expression remained cool, but the flicker in her eyes signaled movement momentum. "I've initiated a public bid leak," she said softly. "Within minutes, every financial newswire will know Quantum Core is circling Horizon Star." Victor laughed. "You're not serious." But Javier's livestream had already crossed 30,000 viewers. Comments flew like bullets. "Is he buying the airline? They just took his seat, and he's tanking their stock. This is wild." Isaiah stayed seated. Still. Controlled. "Claire just triggered a digital avalanche," Aisha said, "and Ethan Pierce at Systems Control is feeding it. How he downgraded your seat status to pending verification internally. It's now a soft lock on your manifest profile. Nothing permanent, but enough to limit privileges." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. Enough to weaponize a glitch into justification. And now, Aisha added, "We can trace every keystroke." Ethan Pierce didn't know his terminal was being mirrored. Didn't know that Isaiah had built the very back-end infrastructure that powered Horizon Star's passenger analytics system 3 years earlier through a shell firm under Quantum Core's enterprise tech division. While they tampered, he tracked. While they whispered, he watched. "You're not just fighting protocol," Aisha said under her breath. "You're fighting the man who designed it." Then Claire returned. "This is your final warning," she said loud enough for the cabin to hear. "You're officially being flagged for disruption. We've notified airport authorities." Isaiah leaned back, nodded. "Perfect," he whispered. "It's time they meet their new boss." Aisha's screen blinked. Phase 1 complete. She looked at him. "Ready for Phase 2. Launch it." Meanwhile, Javier Morales zoomed his phone in on Isaiah's face. "You're looking at a man who hasn't raised his voice once," he told his viewers. "And yet I swear it feels like the cabin is getting colder for everyone else." From behind, someone asked, "What's his name again?" Isaiah Grant Javier replied, "Quantum Core CEO, $3 billion net worth. Helped build the AI that runs predictive logistics for this airline." Gasps, murmurs, heads turning. Suddenly, Isaiah wasn't a discrepant passenger. He was a mirror. reflecting every bias, every assumption, every microaggression back on the system that created them. Claire's voice cut through the cabin again. "You're delaying the entire aircraft, sir. We will be removing you." Isaiah didn't respond, but Aisha did. She pressed play on her tablet. The cabin screens, those same frozen monitors, flickered. Then a breaking headline appeared. Quantum Core CEO involved in profiling incident on Horizon Star Airlines. Acquisition rumors. Swirl. Victor's face twisted. "This is a game. You're not buying anything." Isaiah turned to him at last. "Victor, you're playing Monopoly. I'm playing chess." A cabin attendant approached Claire quietly. "Ma'am, our internal messaging is lighting up. Press requests. Flight logs being pulled. CNBC wants a comment." She brushed him off. Isaiah tapped his watch again. "Nadia, status update, board is aware. Legal team is reading the manifest alteration reports now. Next step, public shareholder memo. Proceed." In the front row, a child whispered to her mother, "Mom, is he really buying the plane?" Her mother didn't answer. She couldn't, because the silence now wasn't awkward. It was reverent. It was the sound of a system realizing it had provoked the wrong man. Then it happened. The cabin lights flickered again. Not failure. Transition. A new logo began cycling on the internal screens, replacing Horizon Star's outdated emblem. Clean, bold, Unity Air. Claire stared in disbelief. "What the hell is this?" Isaiah spoke, voice low but unshakable. "It's the beginning of your end." Claire's eyes darted from the Unity Air logo flickering on the cabin screen to the cold, unshaken face of Isaiah Grant. She didn't speak, but her silence roared. Around her, murmurs turned into low conversation. Passengers started connecting the dots. The man being dragged into question wasn't a disruptive traveler, he was their future boss. Yet the system moved against him anyway. From his workstation behind the bulkhead, Ethan Pierce typed furiously. Sweat pooled under his collar. Horizon Star's internal dashboard was flashing red across multiple nodes. Media alerts manifest inconsistencies, unauthorized terminal access logs. But instead of escalating the issue up the chain, Ethan was doing what he'd always done: protect the institution. He opened the admin console and manually flagged Isaiah's name for federal review. Code 72A Passenger Disruption. With one keystroke, Isaiah Grant, billionaire CEO, confirmed boarding pass holder, and part owner of the airline, was now labeled a flight risk. It was a quiet sabotage, the kind designed to bury people. Aisha saw it instantly. "Ethan just overrode the security review protocol," she whispered, eyes narrowed. "He's falsifying the system. Not incompetence, intentional bias." Isaiah didn't blink. Trace the action. Timestamp it. Screenshot everything. From her seat, Aisha began capturing the violation trail. In the aisle, Claire tapped her headset and called out, "Security protocol active. Cabin command initiated. Passenger in 6A to remain upright seat function disabled for flight safety." Isaiah felt the motor on his seat lock. His light dimmed again. His tray sealed. And the passengers saw it. They felt it. "This is harassment," someone said from row 7C. "Why hasn't anyone questioned the white guy who hit him first?" Another voice called out. Claire ignored it all. Then Victor, emboldened by the chaos, stood and raised his voice. "My carry-on has gone missing," he announced. "My wallet was there." I think he turned to Isaiah. "Maybe someone should check his pockets." The words hit like a slap. Everyone froze. Javier Morales, still lived to over 50,000 viewers, aimed his camera forward. "Are you accusing him of theft?" he asked, voice steady. Victor shrugged. "I'm just saying he was near it." Claire didn't refute him. She didn't object. She simply stepped back and let the narrative take shape. A brown man, a missing wallet, a conveniently timed accusation. It was a story that had played out 1,000 times before, and the system knew how to finish it. But not this time. Isaiah reached into his inner jacket pocket, not to pull out identification, but to hand Aisha a wafer-thin security chip. "Full acquisition credentials," he said quietly. "Encrypted. Time-stamped. Locked to my biometric ID." Aisha slid the chip into her tablet. Her eyes widened. "It's done," she said. "SEC filings are confirmed. FAA notice is active. We own majority stake." Isaiah exhaled slowly. "Then let's stop pretending this is about safety." From the cockpit bulkhead, 2 airport police officers arrived, summoned by Claire's earlier request. One officer, tall mid-40s with sharp features, glanced at Isaiah, then at the tablet in Claire's hand. "He's a disruptive passenger," Claire said firmly. "He's tampered with equipment, refused crew orders, and possibly stolen property." The officer looked unsure. "Is there evidence?" Javier interjected. "This is live streaming to 80,000 people. You want evidence? Watch the footage." He hasn't moved. They disabled his seat. They took his bag. They let a white man slap his phone and said nothing. The officer's jaw tensed. He turned to Isaiah. "Sir, do you have anything that verifies your identity?" Aisha stood. "Yes," she said, voice like a blade. "Dr. Isaiah Grant is the founder of Quantum Core Solutions and, as of 20 minutes ago, majority shareholder of Horizon Star. The FAA has already confirmed the acquisition." A notification pinged on the cabin monitor. "Breaking Quantum Core confirms controlling stake in Horizon Star Airlines. New leadership confirmed mid-flight." Gasps filled the air. Ethan stared at the screen. Red dots flagged violations were now being redirected to FAA auditors monitoring the flight in real time. They were no longer in control of the system. They were the system being investigated. Aisha pressed one more button. Board alert initiated. Internal personnel tampering flagged. HR protocols activated. Claire's voice cracked. "You're not cleared to issue commands on behalf of this airline." Isaiah looked at her calm and devastating. "I don't need to issue commands. The system obeys the data. And the data says, I own the skies you're standing in." Just then, a soft ping echoed through the cabin. All screens shifted again. A new message: "Welcome to Unity Air. A new era begins now." The transformation was no longer pending. It was live. The cabin had never been quieter, and yet something seismic had shifted. Across row 7, passengers looked between each other as the Unity Air rebrand cycled on the overhead screens. It wasn't just a logo. It was proof. A message that the man they'd seen challenged, silenced, and accused had just taken control. But not everyone could process the truth that fast. Claire Donovan, standing beside the locked seat 6A, still clutched her tablet like a lifeline. She stared at the screens, then at Isaiah, then back again. The title beneath his name, Founder Quantum Core. Chairman Unity Air, burned like a spotlight on her own downfall. Victor Crane wasn't done either. "You don't scare me," he hissed, bending down closer to Isaiah. "This is just some PR stunt. You've got cameras, fine, but none of this is real." Isaiah's reply was measured, precise. "Then why are you sweating Victor?" But it wasn't Isaiah who shifted the energy next. It was someone unexpected. A soft voice rose from row 4D. "I saw him get hit." Heads turned. An elderly black woman with a silver bun and a weathered handbag sat straight in her seat, her eyes locked on Claire. "That man," she said, pointing to Victor, struck Isaiah's phone clean off the table. "I was right here. He didn't do a thing to deserve that." Claire opened her mouth to protest, but a second voice joined in. This time from ATF. "I recorded it," a teenage girl said, lifting her phone. "From start to finish. I can airdrop it to anyone who wants proof." Her father, seated beside her, nodded grimly. "This ain't the first time I've seen someone black get treated like a threat on a plane, but it's the first time I've seen him fight back with the entire market on his side." The witnesses were waking up. Not just the ones on the plane, but the ones tuned in from outside. Javier's stream now surpassed 120,000 live viewers. CNN had begun airing the footage in parallel. Hashtags trended globally. Unity Air Isaiah Grant Flight for Justice. A flight attendant near the rear, young Latina eyes filled with conflict, approached Claire and whispered, "Ma'am, the crew group chat is going off. People are saying this could become a class action issue. We might be liable." Claire ignored her, but the shift was spreading. From seat 2B, a tall man in a blue blazer slowly stood. "My name's Captain Robert Ames," he said, voice gravelly but firm. 32 years with Horizon Star. Retired 3 years ago. Even Claire froze. I trained some of the crew on this very aircraft, Ames continued. And I filed 2 official bias complaints about you, Claire, while I was still active. Both disappeared from the system. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. I told management that you escalated conflict disproportionately toward passengers of color. They called me old-fashioned, told me to let it go. Claire paled. That's not true. Ames turned toward the live stream camera. Then let's check the logs, shall we? Aisha nodded. Already on it, she said, fingers tapping furiously. Internal documentation confirms those reports were submitted, but Richard Vaughn, the current head of cabin operations, deleted them from the regional incident queue. Javier turned his camera toward seat 1A, where Richard now sat, head in his hands, shoulders slumped. A man unraveling in real time. A new chime sounded overhead. Unity Air's updated mission statement now rotated on-screen: dignity, equity, visibility, accountability. Welcome to a new standard in aviation. Tears welled in the eyes of the young black flight attendant near the galley. She stepped forward, trembling. My name is Danielle, she said softly, and I was scared to say anything. I watched it all happen. I wanted to stop it. But I didn't think anyone would listen. Isaiah looked up, his expression gentle. We hear you now, he said. Danielle nodded slowly. You're the first black man I've ever seen stand up from a first-class seat and make the whole plane stand still. Not out of fear, out of truth. Then she turned to Claire, voice shaking. But sure. I resign from this crew, Danielle said. Effective immediately. I won't fly under someone who turns a blind eye to racism and calls it protocol. The cabin erupted this time, not in gasps, but in spontaneous applause. Passengers clapped. Some stood. Others cheered. Victor shouted over them. You people are turning this into a circus. But now he was the one alone in silence. Even the officers who'd once approached Isaiah as a suspect were stepping back. One of them, Officer Benton, removed his cap and looked directly at Isaiah. My apologies, sir, he said quietly. We were misinformed. Isaiah gave a slight nod. No triumph, just acknowledgement. Because the truth was no longer whispered, it was being witnessed. And witnesses once awakened don't go back to sleep. As the applause faded, Isaiah Grant remained still. His silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Around him, the cabin buzzed with a new energy, the kind that comes not from spectacle, but from shared recognition. The veil had lifted, but recognition alone wasn't enough. It was time to build the case. Aisha, Isaiah said quietly, we document everything. No emotion, no assumption, just evidence. Already ahead of him, Aisha Patel had her tablet connected to 3 mirrored data sources, the airline's live manifest system, her own secure legal database, and a back-channel quantum core access node, syncing in real time with FAA regulatory feeds. She spoke without looking up. I've flagged all major violations. Manifest. Tampering unauthorized equipment, seizure hostile escalation without cause, and the override of seat functions without a federal directive. Time-stamped. Down to the millisecond. Danielle, the young black attendant who had just resigned, stepped forward again this time with her crew-issued tablet in hand. You'll want this, she said to Aisha. I screen-recorded everything since the first confrontation. The crew chat logs, the override commands from Ethan Pierce. It's all there. Aisha took the device, carefully nodding with gratitude. You're doing more than resigning, Danielle. You're protecting passengers. Danielle's eyes glistened. I just want to work somewhere that doesn't punish people for standing tall. A few rows back, Captain Robert Ames stood from his seat once more. If you're collecting reports, he said firmly, I still have the archived emails I sent to Richard Vaughn about Claire's pattern of selective enforcement. I blind copied myself on every single one. Still in my personal inbox. Isaiah smiled faintly. Please forward them to Aisha. Full chain. Javier Morales panned his camera slowly across the cabin. You're watching this live, he he told his growing audience, now well over 250,000. We're witnessing a digital deposition unfold at 36,000 feet. Meanwhile, in the front of the cabin, Claire Donovan hadn't moved. She stared down at her tablet like it was cracked glass. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper of denial. This isn't legal. This isn't how anything works. But even the crew had started to shift. The second-in-command flight attendant, a tall man named Samir, approached Isaiah and Aisha. "I've been quiet," he said, "but I saw what happened. And I have access to the override sequence Ethan used to lock your seat. I'll send it to your counsel." Aisha responded instantly. "We'll request whistleblower protection under FAA policy. You'll be protected. You have my word." Samir nodded, the tension visibly lifting from his shoulders. Behind him, Ethan Pierce was still hunched behind his console, but his hands no longer danced confidently across the keyboard. They hovered, unsure. His world had shrunk to a blinking cursor and an approaching reckoning. Aisha looked toward the bulkhead and gave a signal. Within seconds, Unity Air's legal alert system lit up the internal screens. Formal inquiry initiated, cabin tampering. Witness reports confirmed. Evidence log syncing in real time. Claire looked around, panic rising. "You don't get to override me," she hissed at Isaiah. "I'm senior crew. You're a passenger." Isaiah finally stood, not with fury, but with calm, decisive motion. "I'm a shareholder," he said with executive authority over operations, "and you've left a trail that's not just unprofessional, it's prosecutable." She stepped back instinctively. Victor Crane, meanwhile, was shaking his head in disbelief. "You're trying to rewrite the rules mid-flight. This is insanity." Isaiah looked at him without malice. "No, Victor. I'm finally enforcing the ones that were ignored." Then came a new voice. Javier, from his perch near row 8, lifted his phone. "The FAA just emailed me," he announced. "They've confirmed receipt of the livestream footage. They're launching an immediate ethics review on Horizon Star protocol violations." He turned the screen toward the cabin. "You see this? It's not just views anymore. It's verification." One by one, passengers began uploading their own angles clips from different perspectives. Moments the main camera missed. A child's father sent in a recording of Claire seizing Isaiah's briefcase. A teenager's video caught Ethan inputting override codes. The data flowed like a tide. Aisha's tablet pinged again. All files verified. Legal bundle ready. Uploading to Unity Air's transparency portal. Isaiah glanced at his smartwatch. "Nadia, prepare the board presentation. Title it, Fail-Safes That Failed." Nadia's voice came through. "Already built. 17 slides, time-stamped events, live footage embedded. Legal team on standby." Danielle looked toward Isaiah. "What happens next?" He turned to her, voice calm. "We don't argue anymore. We reveal." And then, just as if the moment itself responded, the overhead cabin lights shifted from soft white to amber. A new system message appeared on every screen. Unity Air compliance mode active. All interactions now recorded. All manual overrides logged. Equity pulse engaged. Passengers sat straighter. Phones lifted again. Even the police officers who had hovered near the cockpit adjusted their stance. The tone had changed. The plane was no longer a vessel of silence and assumption. It had become a courtroom in the sky. And the evidence unstoppable. Isaiah didn't need to pace shout or signal power. Every movement he made was deliberate. Every silence strategic. And now, with the evidence locked, the live footage streaming, and the passengers bearing witness, he moved to the next phase. "Activate the audit trigger," he said calmly. Aisha nodded, fingers flying across her tablet. "Launching now. FAA compliance grid syncing with Unity Air's infrastructure. We'll have a real-time scan of every violation in the last 72 hours across all departments." Nadia's voice echoed in Isaiah's ear. "Board update received. Directors are reviewing the incident file. Horizon Star stock is down 11.3% and sliding. Stakeholders are calling for emergency session within the hour." Isaiah didn't smile. He simply said, "Escalate to Phase 3. Time to corner the rot." In the back of the plane, Ethan Pierce was panicking. He had opened a secure console, his last attempt to cover his tracks, and began wiping logs. But Unity Air's new backend had been seeded with Quantum Core's forensic AI protocols. Every keystroke Ethan tried to erase was already cloned, hashed, and transmitted to both FAA and Unity Air's servers. Even the backdoors he'd trusted were now firewalled by an AI system he didn't know he was fighting. Isaiah Aisha said without looking up, "He's wiping evidence. He thinks he is." Isaiah replied, "Deploy Echo Trace." With a single tap, Aisha unleashed Echo Trace, a passive digital forensic engine designed to restore altered datasets and log the manipulator in real time. Seconds later, Ethan's terminal froze. A flashing message appeared. Tampering detected. User ID Epiers. Action reversed. Logs secured. He stood abruptly, knocking over his headset. Claire snapped at him. "What are you doing?" Ethan turned pale. "The system, someone's controlling the system." "No," Isaiah corrected from row 6A. "The system is protecting itself. From you." Just then, a new alert pulsed through the cabin screens. Unity Air Systems update. Internal risk level elevated. Command access. Now limited to verified executives only. Claire's tablet buzzed and shut off. So did Ethan's. So did Richard Vaughn's. In a matter of seconds, the entire command structure of Horizon Star's mid-flight crew was locked out of the system they thought they owned. Only Aisha and Isaiah's credentials remained active. Protocol cleanse initiated, Aisha confirmed. Command authority revoked from all unverified nodes. Temporary control reassigned to Quantum Core Oversight AI. Claire stepped forward, livid. "You can't take our tools. You don't have that kind of clearance." Isaiah turned in his seat. "Claire, I designed them." She froze. His voice lowered. "I know which buttons you push. I know how many times you've silenced reports. I know the audit reports. You buried the profiles, you downgraded the crew logs you manipulated to justify punishment. And I know today it ends." Richard Vaughn looked ready to crumble. His lips parted, but no words came out. Then came the kill shot. From the front of the cabin, a sudden chime. All cabin monitors now displayed a rotating presentation. Unity Air. Emergency audit briefing. Slide 1, Flight 217, incident timeline. Slide 2, manifest, tampering logs, user ID, Epiers. Slide 3, passenger footage. Corroboration slide. 4, suppressed crew complaints. Claire Donovan slide. 5, deleted emails. Richard Vaughn. Slide 6, live witness statements. Time-stamped and public. Javier Morales zoomed in with his phone, speaking to over 300,000 live viewers. If you're just joining, Dr. Isaiah Grant. Yes, the Quantum Core CEO is executing the most high-level corporate takedown in real time. From seat 6A. Isaiah leaned toward Aisha. "Let's talk legacy. Is the Unity Equity Fund ready?" She nodded. "We seeded the fund with $2 million from Grant Ventures, targeting aviation training scholarships, internal equity audits, and crisis reporting education for underrepresented workers. Push it live." She tapped a single button. The fund became publicly accessible via Unity Air's new portal. Passengers received a push notification, "Unity Fund activated, building safer skies for all." Danielle, still standing in uniform, but now stripped of loyalty to Horizon Star, gasped. "I just got a scholarship application form on my work email." Isaiah turned slightly. "You'll help lead the first mentorship wave if you're willing." Her voice broke. "Yes, please." Meanwhile, Victor Crane paced near the galley, his anger now toothless. "You think this little performance is permanent?" he snarled. "You think people care in a week?" Aisha looked up finally. "You still don't understand. This isn't a performance. It's documentation. And it never disappears." A final update hit the monitors. Unity Air structural transfer, 56% stake. Executed CEO authority, Dr. Isaiah Grant. Confirmed the cabin seemed to hold its breath. And then came the final strategy Isaiah had been waiting to deploy. He tapped his watch again. "Nadia, initiate media relay. Full video. All slides. Publish now." Across networks, emails began hitting inboxes. Journalists, FAA executives, lawmakers. The reckoning had gone global. And none of it, not a second, could be buried. Claire Donovan's hands were trembling now, but she masked it behind a tightening jaw and straightened spine. The tablet in her hands was dead. Her command access revoked, her crew fractured. Around her monitors still displayed Isaiah Grant's name, beside a title she could neither erase nor deny, Chairman Unity Air. But she wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. This isn't a proper handover, she snapped. This isn't policy. This is a coup. Isaiah turned to face her directly for the first time since she'd tried to remove him from seat 6A. No, Claire, he said calmly. This is accountability, and you've mistaken privilege for permanence. Passengers leaned in, some visibly holding their breath. Others raised phones, their cameras capturing every frame. You humiliated me publicly, confiscated my belongings, disabled my seat. Isaiah continued. You did it because you thought I didn't belong here. That's not protocol. That's profiling. Claire's voice cracked. I followed procedure. Isaiah's tone sharpened. Then why did that procedure never apply to Victor? All heads turned. Victor froze mid-stride near the galley. You allowed him to claim my seat without verification. You ignored him when he struck me. You supported his false accusations. You enabled a lie because it fit your expectations. Javier Morales, now broadcasting live to over 410,000 viewers, zoomed in on Claire's face. The high-definition feed didn't miss the flicker of panic behind her eyes. You're twisting it, she shot back. I've enforced the same rules for everyone. Then explain this, Aisha said, rising from her seat and holding her tablet high. 15 prior complaints against your conduct. All suppressed, all dismissed, all aligned by race or class. Claire's mouth opened, but no words came. Aisha stepped closer. One passenger was denied boarding because of a vague odor. Another because his suit didn't match first-class expectations. And every single one of them was a person of color. Javier turned his camera again. This is it, folks. The confrontation. The moment the gatekeeper gets handed the mirror. Isaiah stood now, towering, composed. Your authority was never about rules. It was about control. But you lost control the moment you tried to erase someone the system couldn't. Erase, Claire laughed nervously. You're acting like you were under attack. I was, Isaiah said, not with fists, with protocol, with terminal codes, with corporate silence. And you know what the worst part is? He stepped forward, not aggressively, but deliberately. You're not unique. You're a symptom, but you're the one who showed your face on the wrong day. Claire's shoulders sagged. Then she snapped. I want you off this aircraft. Right now, her voice echoed shrill and strained. The cabin didn't flinch. No one moved. Even the airport police officers at the front remained still, one of them muttering quietly into his shoulder mic. A voice came over the cabin speakers, not from the crew, but from the cockpit. This is Captain Annika Tran. Due to the developing situation, all removal requests are suspended, pending confirmation from headquarters. Dr. Grant is to remain undisturbed. FAA instructions confirmed. Claire blinked. Her captain had spoken, and not in her favor. From the back, Danielle stepped forward again, removing the nameplate from her uniform and holding it out. You tried to make me small, she told Claire, voice shaking. Told me I wasn't ready for leadership material. Said I lacked polish. But I watched Dr. Grant lead this cabin without raising his voice once. Then she dropped the nameplate at Claire's feet. I'm not your crew anymore. Claire stepped backward, as if the uniform badge burned her. Isaiah's voice lowered. You still think this is about you? She swallowed hard. Isn't it? No, he said. It's about every passenger you humiliated, every crew member you demoted, every complaint you buried, every system you manipulated to preserve your comfort. Then he tapped his watch. A chime rang out. The monitors changed. Live recording playback initiated. Claire's voice filled the cabin, grainy but unmistakable, pulled from a training session 3 months prior. We don't need to train those people. They're just here for optics. Passengers gasped. Victor looked stunned. Claire shook her head violently. That's edited. But Aisha interrupted. It's not. Original file. Metadata confirmed. FAA audit log has it on record now. Claire's face crumpled. Isaiah turned to the nearest officer. "Will you escort Ms. Donovan to the front of the aircraft, please? She is hereby relieved of all duties effective immediately." The officer nodded. "Confirmed." As they approached, Claire's defiance drained. The strength in her legs seemed to falter. She tried to say something, anything, but the silence around her was louder than any defense. Passengers didn't cheer. They didn't need to. What settled over the cabin wasn't celebration. It was justice. As Claire was walked forward, Javier whispered into his phone, "You're witnessing history." Power no longer whispers, it rewrites. And for the first time, all flight, Isaiah allowed himself a breath. One confrontation ended, but the reckoning was far from over. Claire Donovan disappeared down the aisle with the officers. Her steps stiff, her shoulders curled inwards. The silence she left behind was not emptiness, it was a signal. The system had started to crack, and now it was breaking wide open. Isaiah turned, slowly scanning the cabin with calm authority. "Richard Vaughn," he called out, voice unwavering. From seat 1A, the head of cabin operations sat like a man staring at a slow-motion train crash. His face was pale, eyes unfocused, his hands fidgeting with his now useless staff access card. "You oversaw this flight's crew. You approved Claire's position. You received formal complaints and deleted them from the regional review logs," Isaiah continued. Richard opened his mouth to object, but Javier Morales already had the camera aimed. "Say it," Javier said. "If you're innocent, say it." Richard looked around. Every phone in the cabin pointed at him. Passengers stared not with curiosity, but with judgment sharpened by truth. "I was under pressure," Richard stammered. "Corporate wanted clean numbers, no escalation reports. They said it hurt investor confidence." "And your conscience?" Isaiah asked. Richard didn't respond. Aisha rose beside Isaiah and held up her tablet. 12 deleted complaints, 2 whistleblower alerts suppressed, and 3 direct manipulations of passenger status, all traced back to your credentials. Richard slumped. "I didn't want this, but you allowed it," Isaiah said. Then came the chime. Cabin monitors updated again. Unity Air. Command realignment. Notification Richard Vaughn. Access revoked ground review. Initiated by FAA Ethics Division. Even the flight attendants in the front gasped. Aisha turned to the officers. "Mr. Vaughn is no longer authorized to oversee any cabin functions. Please accompany him to the crew galley for debriefing." Richard stood shakily and followed, not resisting. 2 down. But the system had one more hand. Ethan Pierce. Still seated near the terminal bulkhead, Ethan had watched the collapse unfold with clenched fists and darting eyes. He was no longer typing. He was breathing hard, hunched forward, eyes locked on a screen that now refused to obey him. Aisha addressed him calmly. "Mr. Pierce, would you like to explain why you attempted to override the passenger manifest to flag Dr. Grant as a security threat?" Ethan's voice was sharp with panic. "I was told to follow protocol. I didn't know who he was." Isaiah stepped forward. "You knew enough to block his seat. You knew enough to disable his light, his recline, his access. And you knew how to do it without leaving a clear trail until you were caught." Javier interjected. "Over 500,000 people are watching this, Mr. Pierce. Are you saying your job was to sabotage passenger data without verifying the truth?" Ethan looked like he might vomit. I was just following orders." Isaiah's tone dropped. "No, you were hiding behind them." Aisha tapped her tablet again. "FAA compliance logs show you attempted to permanently blacklist Dr. Grant from all future flights. That action was blocked by Unity Air's AI override, thankfully, but the intent was logged." Ethan's screen locked. A new banner appeared above him. "Internal security breach logged. Identity E. Pierce. Violation intentional passenger tampering. Status terminated." His badge lit red, then went dark. Isaiah looked to the crew. "Mr. Pierce is to be removed from any operational oversight immediately. He is no longer affiliated with this flight, this crew, or this company." No one objected. No one defended him. He stood slowly, hands shaking, and stumbled down the aisle under escort. Now only passengers remained. and a different kind of silence settled over the cabin, not one of fear, but of stunned awe. 3 officials, Claire, Richard, Ethan, neutralized within a single hour, not by violence, not even by public outrage, but by facts, by transparency, by strategy. Isaiah returned to his seat and for the first time leaned back. The seat reclined again. The light above him flicked on. Unity Air Systems had acknowledged his authority. He didn't need to shout it. It was visible, verified. From the back of the plane, a middle-aged white man in glasses raised his hand. "Dr. Grant," he said nervously, I run a regional airline. "Smaller, but we've had similar issues. How do we fix this?" From the top down, Isaiah looked up thoughtful. "We stop assuming policies are protection," he said. "We start measuring outcomes, not intentions. And we remove power from people who confuse uniform with immunity." A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the rows. Javier Morales' camera, still live, nodded. "Systemic collapse isn't just destruction," he said. "It's the space left behind to rebuild." Isaiah turned to Aisha. "Have they confirmed the board vote?" She smiled. "Unanimous. Ownership confirmed. FAA registration complete. Horizon Star is dissolved. Unity Air is now official." Outside the aircraft, the setting sun dipped toward the horizon. Inside, the shadows of the old system had collapsed, and from its ruins, something new was beginning to rise. The cabin didn't erupt in applause. There was no cheering, no chanting. Instead, a deeper kind of silence washed over the aircraft, one filled not with fear or tension, but clarity. The rebirth had begun. Overhead, the monitors no longer flickered between warnings or profiles. They now displayed a clean, elegant logo in white and blue Unity Air. Beneath it, 3 simple words pulsed softly: dignity, equity, visibility. For the first time that entire flight, Isaiah Grant allowed his shoulders to settle, not in triumph, but in transition. He wasn't just holding a seat anymore. He was shaping the direction of the sky itself. Aisha leaned toward him from seat 5C. "The system stabilized," she said. "FAA just posted their formal recognition. Unity Air is listed. Horizon Star is archived." Isaiah didn't reply immediately. He watched the cabin instead. Passengers were talking not about delays or missed connections, but about what they'd just witnessed. Some cried quietly. Some stared at their phones, reading coverage spreading across every major outlet. Others simply sat in thought. Danielle stood near the galley, surrounded by younger crew members who now looked at her not as junior, but as something more. Someone who had the courage to step forward when no one else had. One whispered, "I never would have said a word if you hadn't gone first." Danielle smiled barely. "I wasn't first. I was just the first one who finally had someone powerful enough to protect the truth." Captain Annika Tran's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We'll be pushing back from the gate shortly. Our flight crew has stabilized operations. You may notice a few system changes. We are now operating under the new Unity Air framework. This includes live compliance tracking and passenger equity monitoring, now standard on every flight." Passengers exchanged glances. One man in business attire clapped softly once, then stopped, but others joined. Not loud, not forced, just honest. At the bulkhead near the front, a new notice screen lit up announcing Unity Air's Equity Pulse program in detail. Every crew action logged, every seating decision time-stamped, every passenger interaction evaluated for bias. Quarterly results published publicly. Zero tolerance for silence. A teenager whispered, "We're watching the industry change from the inside." Javier Morales, still streaming, wiped his eyes. "I've recorded protests, board meetings, policy hearings. But this is a shift that didn't need a single march, just a man who refused to be moved." Isaiah turned slightly, his voice measured. "No one wins alone." Aisha nodded. "You just made it easier for everyone else to stop hiding." A few rows back, Captain Robert Ames, the retired pilot, typed quietly on a laptop he'd pulled from a leather case. He wasn't responding to reporters. He wasn't calling lawyers. He was writing a letter to the FAA. A statement. a witness account, and a confession of his own complicity for having stayed silent too long. Next to him, a middle-aged Asian woman. A flight attendant from another airline held up her phone with tears in her eyes. "My daughter's watching this stream," she said, to no one in particular. "She just texted me. She said she's proud to see someone who looks like her take control without shouting." From across the aisle, someone replied, "That's what power looks like when it knows what it's for." The aircraft pulled slowly from the gate. It wasn't just a departure, it was symbolic. The flight wasn't taking off yet, but the company had already changed altitude. Isaiah adjusted his seat. It responded instantly. Then, without a word, he opened his secure laptop connected to the Unity Air Systems hub and launched the first company-wide onboarding file. Unity Air Flight Crew Orientation Subject. Cultural Accountability and Passenger Respect Protocol Status. Mandatory due 72 hours. Aisha leaned over. "You know they'll fight this." Quietly, strategically. Not Claire or Richard. Others. The one still embedded. Isaiah nodded. "That's why we don't just install rules. We install reflexes. Equity isn't a poster, it's a process." Outside the window, dusk deepened across the tarmac. But inside, Unity Air Flight 217, something brighter had taken root. A new kind of flight path. One not determined by altitude or destination, but by values. And for the first time in the lives of many aboard, the air felt honest. The runway lights stretched ahead in twin lines of amber and white, but inside Unity Air Flight 217, all attention was pointed not forward, but inward. The takeoff had been delayed, but no one minded. They were watching history descend like landing gear, slow, precise, irreversible. Aisha's tablet buzzed again. She scanned the notification with a practiced calm. "SEC just flagged Ethan's override logs," she said to Isaiah. "They're launching a formal investigation into Horizon Star's digital security practices." Isaiah nodded. "Good. Forward it to the FAA's Ethics Bureau and request joint review." No more buried data. Then came a ping, this one deeper, heavier. Unity Air's internal audit platform had finished its sweep. 94 flagged incidents. 22 involved discriminatory seat changes. 13 included physical or verbal confrontation. 9 were filed as resolved without passenger input. All logged under Claire Donovan or her subordinates. Aisha pressed one button. Full incident log sent to Department of Transportation, FAA, and Unity Airboard. Isaiah didn't blink. He simply asked any repeat names in the witness accounts. "Yes," Aisha said. 3 flight attendants under Richard's command were listed in 6 or more complaints. One of them, Gina Fuller, was the one who escorted a disabled veteran out of business class last month because his prosthetic leg made other passengers uncomfortable. A new message appeared on the cabin's central monitor. Unity Air Leadership Memo. Immediate staff review underway. All personnel flagged in prior complaints are subject to reassignment, suspension, or removal. No exceptions. Crew members on board exchanged glances. Some looked relieved. Others looked afraid. But no one objected. Danielle stood near the galley, clutching her phone. "One of the complaints listed me," she whispered, "back when I tried to speak up last year. I'd forgotten." "It wasn't forgotten," Isaiah said. "It was hidden. But not anymore." Outside, the plane was cleared for pushback. The cabin buzzed with renewed energy. But before departure, Unity Air had one more flight to ground internally. From seat 8A, a young black woman stood up, phone in hand. "Dr. Grant," she said nervously, "I'm Monique, HR associate for another airline. We've been watching this stream back at our HQ. Our CEO wants your training protocols. They want to integrate Unity's audit system. They said, this isn't damage control, this is architecture." Isaiah nodded. "Tell them it's open source, but with one condition." "What's that transparency?" "Full commitment. No partial programs for PR. Equity isn't modular." Aisha smiled. "I'll send the first implementation template tonight." Behind them, Javier Morales turned back to his live stream, now pushing over 610,000 viewers. Unity Air just confirmed that all records of discrimination tied to former management are being published, reviewed, and subjected to third-party audit, he reported. For the first time in airline history, we're seeing instant structural consequence. In the back row, someone whispered, "They're not just reacting, they're rebuilding in real time." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., the news cycle had flipped. CNN, MSNBC, even conservative outlets like Newswatch were now devoting full segments to the Unity flight. The headlines wrote themselves, "Black CEO flips discrimination into ownership mid-flight." Boardroom at 36,000 feet. Airline overhauled before takeoff. Reporters began calling it the first live corporate reformation, but Isaiah didn't care for headlines. He cared for details. And the next one mattered. "Aisha," he said, "what happened to Victor Crane's private equity firm?" She looked up. Their investors are pulling funds. 4 media outlets picked up his comments. Several partners are demanding his resignation. Isaiah nodded once. Let it play out. His fall is his own. Then came another alert. The National Black Aviation Association issued a formal commendation in recognition of Dr. Isaiah Grant's unwavering commitment to equity, transparency, and justice in aviation leadership. His conduct aboard Unity Air Flight 217 sets a new benchmark for ethical authority in travel. Isaiah read it, closed the file, and said quietly, "Frame it." For Danielle, Aisha smiled. She'll need it in her training classroom. Meanwhile, 2 of the junior attendants who had remained silent until now stepped forward. One of them, a young man named Harris, removed his pin. "We've both submitted our resignations," he said, "not because we want to leave Unity Air, but because we don't want to carry the weight of Horizon Star's past into this future." Isaiah looked at them. "You won't need to resign. You'll reapply under Unity standards. Let your work, not the uniform, define your presence." Then finally, a message rolled in from FAA Command itself. All Unity Air transformation protocols verified. Horizon Star certifications dissolved. Effective immediately, Unity Air is the recognized operating entity, acknowledged by Federal Aviation Authority. It was official. Horizon Star had not just collapsed. It had been disassembled piece by piece, name by name, action by action. And in its place now stood a company not built on apologies, but accountability. The plane hadn't left the ground, but the balance of power had already left the stratosphere. Less than 2 hours ago, Claire Donovan had barked orders in aisle 6. Richard Vaughn had overseen operations from his perch in seat 1A. Ethan Pierce had quietly controlled every cabin system from behind his bulkhead screen. And Victor Crane, well, he walked the plane like he owned the air between the rows. Now they were ghosts in their own machine. Isaiah Grant sat calmly in seat 6A, still deliberate, not because he was restricted, but because he no longer had to move. The world was coming to him. And more importantly, it was listening. The monitors refreshed once more. Unity Air. Permanent Personnel Action Summary. Claire Donovan. Terminated. Richard Vaughn. Terminated Ethan Pierce. Terminated Gina Fuller. Suspended pending review. Victor Crane. Banned indefinitely from Unity Air flights. Reason passenger assault. False accusation. Disruption. Verified discriminatory conduct. Victor, who had remained unusually silent since the last crew removal, now stood. He moved slowly, carefully, as if still hoping to regain control through posture alone. "This is absurd," he muttered. "You can't just erase people's reputations in the middle of a flight." Javier Morales zoomed his camera toward him. You didn't mind when a reputation was being erased in seat 6A. Victor looked toward Isaiah, but the composure of the man before him shattered any remaining illusion of superiority. "I've built companies bigger than this stunt," Victor snapped. "I've chaired boards, advised investors, mentored tech startups. You think this moment is power. It's PR." Isaiah tilted his head. "Then you should understand perception better, because perception just cost you your future." Aisha stood and tapped her tablet. "Just confirmed. Your largest institutional investor has frozen your accounts pending internal investigation. You made headlines, Mr. Crane, but not the kind that attract capital. Victor scoffed, lips twitching, then turned to the nearest officer. Am I being detained? The taller officer replied simply, No, but you're being watched, carefully. With no exit, Victor retreated to his seat. Smaller now, diminished. In his shadow, Isaiah's presence grew. A new notice appeared on all screens. Unity Air Reinstatement Framework, launched former Horizon. Star employees may reapply for Unity Air under revised standards of conduct, equity training, and passenger-first accountability protocols. Danielle turned to Isaiah. You're giving them a second chance. He nodded. Not all of them, but the ones who want to grow, who admit failure, and who prove they can lead differently, they'll have a path. She looked surprised. Even after what they did, Isaiah's voice was quiet. Power doesn't grow when it mirrors cruelty. It grows when it reforms it. The passengers around them nodded, not because it was soft, but because it was right. And that's when something unexpected happened. Richard Vaughn returned. His face was drawn, the confident gleam now extinguished, but his steps were measured. He paused in front of Isaiah, then in front of Danielle. I failed you, he said simply. You were right. I hid behind the silence of structure because I thought neutrality would save me. It didn't. He turned to the passengers. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I owe you the truth. Aisha watched him closely. Say it. Richard nodded. I knew Claire was profiling passengers. I ignored it. I deleted complaints. I thought it was easier than challenging decades of internal rot. And now I see who paid the price. Danielle stared at him for a long moment. Do you even know the names of the people you erased? No. Richard whispered, but I want to learn them. Isaiah gestured toward the rear jump seat. Sit there. Listen to this flight until we land. Not as a supervisor. As a passenger. Richard nodded and stepped away quietly. Isaiah turned to Aisha. Publish a statement, but don't sanitize it. Full audio and transcript, she asked. Yes, Isaiah said. Let his failure become someone else's wake-up call. Another notification chimed. Unity Air. Passenger Bill of Dignity, published available at unityair.com. Dignity mandatory reading for all personnel. Required acknowledgement by every employee before resuming duty. Passengers across the plane received the document via their in-seat entertainment system. One woman whispered, they made dignity a policy. A man in a business suit replied, it should have always been one. Isaiah leaned back. For the first time, he wasn't the one being watched. He was the one resetting the system that once tried to erase him. And now the system bowed. The transformation was no longer conceptual. It was structural, real. As the aircraft taxied slowly across the tarmac, Isaiah Grant stood in the aisle not as a passenger, not even as a CEO, but as something rarer, a reformer standing in the ruins of the system he just dismantled. The screens flickered again. Unity Air Flight 217. Update. Executive Director of In-Flight Ethics, Dr. Isaiah Grant. Legal Oversight, Aisha Patel. General Counsel, Interim Director of Cabin Culture and Equity, Danielle Rivers. Danielle blinked. She turned to Isaiah. Wait, that's me. Isaiah nodded, smiling for the first time that flight. I don't believe in job titles as rewards. I believe in earned impact. You spoke up. You showed courage before comfort. That's the first qualification for leadership here. The cabin stirred with applause, tentative at first, then building as passengers realized what had just happened. For the first time, a junior crew member had been elevated to executive status mid-flight, not because of politics or performance reviews, but because of principle. Aisha added, Danielle, you'll work directly with me to create a mentorship and protection system for minority and first-time crew members. We'll roll it out company-wide by end of quarter. Danielle's hands trembled as she took the tablet Aisha passed her, reviewing the provisional executive contract. This doesn't happen, she whispered. Not to people like me. Isaiah's voice was gentle but certain. It does now. Just behind them, a passenger near seat 7A stood up, an older white woman with a kind, wrinkled face and a velvet scarf. Dr. Grant, She said, her voice warm but clear. "I've flown first class for 30 years, and I've watched too many black and brown crew members tiptoe around men like Victor." She paused. "What you did here today, it didn't just change a company. It changed people like me. You showed us that dignity doesn't disrupt it, restores." Isaiah bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, but dignity isn't a one-time decision. It's a cultural discipline. And that's what Unity Air is now about." From the front of the plane, Captain Annika Tran emerged from the cockpit, still in uniform, but no longer just a name over the intercom. She approached Isaiah and saluted informally. "Sir," she said, "on behalf of flight operations, I'd like to request a seat on Unity Air's leadership committee. Not as a pilot, but as someone who wants to make sure your vision doesn't stay on the ground." Isaiah extended his hand. "You're already on it." A new message flashed on-screen. Unity Air Leadership Council Provisional Isaiah Grant, Executive Chairman Aisha Patel, Legal and Systems Integrity Annika Tran, Flight Operations and Safety Culture Danielle Rivers, In-Flight Equity and Mentorship. TBD, Passenger Advocacy Representative. TBD, Tech Integration/AI Oversight. A teenager in row 9 raised her hand. "What's passenger advocacy?" Aisha answered with a smile. "It's a permanent voting seat on our leadership council held by a rotating passenger voted by public submission to ensure that the people we serve always have a voice in how we operate." The girl nodded slowly. "Then this really is different." Javier Morales whispered to his phone, "You're watching corporate democracy take flight." Isaiah stepped back slightly and looked toward the back rows, where quiet passengers were now sitting up straighter, their eyes no longer filled with passive detachment but possibility. Then came the final confirmation. Unity Air FAA acknowledgement received. Governance model approved. Leadership Council. Operational. Danielle exhaled, almost overwhelmed. This started with a seat dispute. "And it ends," Isaiah said, "with a seat realignment." He gestured to the cabin as a whole. Unity Air isn't about who sits where. It's about how we treat those who sit among us. Then he turned to Javier. "Keep filming. The world doesn't need to be told about Unity. It needs to witness it." Javier nodded. "Already happening, sir." Isaiah returned to seat 6A, and for the first time when the seat adjusted, it didn't just accommodate his body, it reflected his authority. In that moment, Unity Air wasn't just a company. It was a movement in motion. At 36,000 feet, Unity Air wasn't just flying. It was reprogramming. From policy to practice, from manual to mindset, the airline was undergoing an institutional shift that no one on board had expected when they first buckled their seatbelts. And Isaiah Grant was already 10 steps ahead. "Let's initiate the 3-pillar restructuring model," he said quietly to Aisha. She nodded, pulling up the Unity Air dashboard from her tablet. Unity Air 3-pillar reform initiative. 1. Equity and ethics framework. 2. Transparent accountability system. 3. Passenger-driven oversight. Each pillar was live. Each had already been coded into Unity Air's new operating architecture. Isaiah leaned into his seat microphone. "Activate live onboarding mode," he said. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. Then, one by one, the in-flight screens and personal devices displayed a new screen. "Welcome to Unity Air. You're part of the change. All crew and passengers may now explore our new ethical flight program. All interactions from this point forward are logged under full transparency. Feedback is encouraged. Anonymity, guaranteed. Retaliation forbidden." From seat 5B, a man in his 60s with a navy blazer blinked. "This is..." On the seat screen, Aisha smiled. Real reform starts where real silence lived in the spaces no one thought to look. Nearby, a former Horizon Star attendant named Samir whispered, "They're turning every screen into a safeguard." But the changes weren't just surface level. Isaiah turned to Captain Annika Tran. "Start rotating crew briefings. Every Unity Air flight must begin with an ethical declaration. No more, 'We care about your comfort' platitudes. Let's talk values, not velvet." Annika nodded. "We'll start with this aircraft." She approached the intercom panel and pressed the override. "This is Captain Tran," her voice rang out. "As a Unity Air aircraft, this cabin now operates under new institutional values. Our mission is not just safe travel, it is dignified, visible, and equitable travel. Every crew member has been briefed. Every decision is logged. We don't fly in silence anymore." Passengers looked around. This was no longer a PR patch. This was a policy shift. From the rear, Danielle Rivers stood with a stack of printed documents, interim crew commitment contracts. "These are real," she said to the nearest attendants. "They include a code of conduct, a reporting chain with third-party legal oversight, and a statement of ethics each employee must sign before resuming duty." The two younger attendants from earlier stepped forward without hesitation. "We'll be the first," one of them said. "It's an honor." Danielle handed them pens. At the same time, Javier Morales updated his audience, now over 725,000 viewers. "They're not waiting for a committee or next quarter's budget," he said. "Unity Air is building the next era of air travel mid-flight. And it's not a slogan, it's a system." From his seat, Isaiah turned to Aisha. "Let's discuss anti-retaliation infrastructure. We need a firewall stronger than policy. We need culture coding." "Already prepared," Aisha replied. "We've embedded behavioral AI to flag patterns of silencing, passive-aggressive scheduling, and peer isolation across internal crew platforms. The algorithm cross-references these patterns with past complaints to predict and prevent workplace retaliation." "Real protection," Isaiah murmured. "Not just performative." She added, "We've also added direct access to an independent ombuds team external from Unity Air with a 72-hour mandatory response window. No more HR gatekeeping." Meanwhile, Captain Tran returned with an update. "We've received confirmation. 3 other airlines have requested Unity Air's reform package. Looks like the industry is watching." Isaiah wasn't surprised. They should. But then he looked to seat 9C, where a quiet woman had been watching everything without a word. She raised her hand. "I'm Roslyn," she said. "I'm deaf. And I just noticed that every screen here now has real-time closed captioning. Even the emergency instructions. I've flown 30 years. That's never happened." Danielle smiled. "It's called Equity Layer. Launched 15 minutes ago. Accessible display modes for vision, hearing, reading, and anxiety conditions. Every passenger gets to be seen." Roslyn nodded, eyes wet. "I feel seen." Isaiah exhaled slowly. "Then we're on the right path." One more chime echoed. A final notice spread across all screens. Unity Air Charter of Reform, signed by all executive officers. Certified by FAA-audited quarterly passenger oversight committee applications, open. Now, the message closed with a single sentence. This airline belongs to no silence, only to truth. The shift wasn't contained to the cabin anymore. While Unity Air Flight 217 hovered in its final moments before takeoff, the outside world had already lifted off emotionally, politically, culturally. Public awakening had ignited. From New York to Nairobi, Unity Air was trending at #1 globally across X Threads and TikTok. Short clips of Isaiah Grant's quiet composure filled timelines. Danielle's declaration, Claire's removal, the reading of the passenger bill of dignity. Each post was a match, and the world was dry kindling. In a studio in Los Angeles, news anchor Riley Sandford looked into the camera. This isn't just a story about a flight gone wrong. It's about what happens when the silent ones finally stand. When one man rewrites the system midair and makes it stick. On Capitol Hill, Senator Adrian Bell, one of the youngest black senators in the country, retweeted Unity Air's onboarding policy with a single caption, "This is what legislation wishes it could be." Meanwhile, aviation unions, airline staff forums, and even rideshare workers began discussing the Unity Air model. Copycat hashtags sprang up. Equity above altitude. Cabin justice and Seat 6A standard. But it wasn't just noise. It was momentum. In a corporate skyscraper in Dallas, the CEO of a rival airline called an emergency board meeting. "We can't afford to look like Horizon Star 2.0, he said flatly. "Start auditing crew conduct logs." Find the skeletons before the public does. In Singapore, a disabled travel rights organization issued a statement: Unity Air has achieved in one afternoon what we fought for over a decade. Let this be the model. And on the ground in Miami, outside Quantum Corps headquarters, a group of aviation students held handmade signs that read, "Reform takes flight." Unity means everyone. Chairman Grant, we see you. Back on Flight 217, the ripple effect was visible even before landing. Danielle's inbox pinged again and again. Thank you for saying what we've never been allowed to. I've been afraid to speak up for 6 years. Today, I'm not. Unity Air just made me want to fly again. She read them with trembling hands. It's not about me, she whispered. Aisha heard her. It never was. But you became the mirror. Isaiah leaned forward in his seat, his voice just loud enough for those around him. One policy on one flight would have faded in a week, but we made this a process. That's how public trust is restored, not by noise, but by systems they can see working. Javier Morales was still live, still streaming, still stunned. This might be the first time in my career, he told his audience, now surpassing 850,000, that I've seen a scandal turn into a strategy. And it didn't need a whistleblower. It needed a witness who wouldn't back down. He turned the camera to the screen above him. There, glowing steadily, was the Unity Air charter. Passengers across the plane tapped their screens and submitted comments. Ideas, stories, messages of gratitude. It wasn't just engagement, it was participation. The public didn't feel like passengers anymore. They felt like partners. Suddenly, the cabin lighting adjusted again. Gentler now, warmer, not harsh like before. A teenager in 7F whispered, "Why does it feel like the plane's breathing with us?" Danielle smiled softly. Because for the first time it is. Then Isaiah's smartwatch buzzed. A message from Nadia Cole at Quantum Corps Unified Passenger Trust Index just launched. Unity Air scored 92/100 within 3 hours, highest score ever recorded for a new brand in aviation. Wall Street is watching. But more importantly, so is Main Street. He showed it to Aisha. She nodded. And not $1 of this was bought. It was earned. As if on cue, the final internal cabin update appeared. Public oversight portal now live. Passengers may submit flight reviews, bias reports, and transparency requests. All data published quarterly in partnership with FAA Civil Rights Division 1 child, no older than 7, looked up from the screen and said aloud. This airline tells the truth. The adults around him didn't laugh. They agreed. In seat 10C, a middle-aged Latina woman who had said nothing all flight pulled out her phone and typed into the portal. My name is Mariella. 10 years ago, I was told to step back from boarding for random checks 5 times in 1 year. I stopped flying. Today, I cried watching this. I booked my next flight for me and my daughter. Isaiah sat back, still solemn. This wasn't a marketing win. It was a moral signal, and the world had received it. The reverberations didn't stop at Unity Air's cabin door. They spilled into conference rooms, control towers, union halls, and boardrooms across the globe. By the time Unity Air Flight 217 finally received clearance to taxi for takeoff, the airline industry had already entered a period insiders were now calling the Grant effect. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours of the flight's livestream conclusion, 6 major airlines issued public statements. Some genuine, some clearly scrambling. Delta Airways CEO tweeted, "We're reviewing internal equity practices." Unity Air set a precedent we can't ignore. Meanwhile, Concord Global Flights quietly paused its boarding procedure manual updates pending legal review. An internal memo leaked hours later revealed the reason: do not trigger a Unity-style incident. Update conflict resolution and discriminatory escalation protocols immediately. At the International Aviation Governance Summit in Zurich, Unity Air's passenger bill of dignity was cited in 3 keynote speeches, including one from a former FAA administrator. And in New York, the Civil Aviation Legal Consortium called for mandatory racial bias training across all federally certified flight crews. But perhaps the most surprising echo came from unexpected terrain: hotels, ride shares, retail chains. Isaiah's model of embedded accountability with public-facing data trails had sparked curiosity. Executives at Luxstay hotels convened a closed-door meeting and later announced, "Starting this quarter, every guest interaction tagged as discriminatory will be reviewed by an independent third party within 72 hours with summaries made public. We call it our Unity Report." On social media service, workers began tagging Unity Air in posts about unjust firings, discrimination, or mishandled complaints, asking, "When do we get a Unity model?" And quietly behind closed doors, HR departments across multiple industries were flooded with internal employee queries. Do we have an anonymous equity channel? Can I review my own disciplinary record? Why is our whistleblower line outsourced to a marketing firm? The system had awakened not by protest, but by proof. And the industry, long insulated by bureaucracy and gray areas, was facing the full color of its consequences. Meanwhile, Unity Air wasn't done innovating. Isaiah sat in the executive console on board Flight 217, reviewing new proposals flooding in via their Unity public policy portal, a space where workers, passengers, and even regulators could suggest reforms. Aisha read aloud. Request from the Aviation Institute of Europe. Can Unity Air provide open-source training modules for onboarding ethics? We'd like to pilot them in 3 major markets. Isaiah nodded. Approved. Label it the Unity Ethics Blueprint. Then came an email from the United Nations Aviation Rights Watch. Dear Dr. Grant, we believe Unity Air systems could serve as a template for conflict-sensitive regions where airline abuse goes unreported. Would you be willing to consult? Isaiah tapped a single response. Yes, let's fly farther than borders. Back in the cabin, Danielle approached with a printed report. These are the requests we've received to speak at aviation colleges. 3 of them want to rename their ethics wing after Unity's model. Isaiah raised an eyebrow. That soon, Danielle shrugged. Turns out change doesn't wait when someone finally shows it's possible. From his seat, Javier Morales read through his stream's comment log. I'm a cabin crew lead in Dubai. My team just watched the full flight recap together. We cried. I've worked in airline HR for 11 years. I've never seen a leadership council publish real-time misconduct reports. Unity Air just changed my job description. Even retired pilots began emerging from silence. Captain Robert Ames, who had testified during the flight, published a guest op-ed in the New York Times titled, Why Unity Air Broke the Ceiling Horizon Star Pretended Didn't Exist. It went viral. Isaiah's smartwatch buzzed again. A notification from the FAA Unity Air's rebranding and structural reform initiative has been cited as a model for federal airline equity standards. Further meetings requested. He turned to Aisha. We're going to be invited to regulatory tables. She smiled. They'll expect us to compromise, to soften. Isaiah shook his head. We won't. Not one layer. Then came the twist that neither of them anticipated. A video surfaced from an anonymous source shot inside a Horizon Star executive meeting weeks prior to Flight 217. In it, executives discussed racial targeting metrics for boarding risk assessment. The data was clear the language damming. CNN played the clip on loop. Unity Air's response. We don't erase history. We learn from it. The Unity Archive will preserve all documentation of past systemic failures for public viewing because silence isn't the cure. Memory is. Passengers, activists, and reformers applauded. Industry lobbyists grew nervous, and airline CEOs who once dismissed equity as a buzzword suddenly found themselves rewriting their playbooks, not out of fear, but out of necessity. Because now the standard had shifted, and Unity Air wasn't the exception anymore. It was the expectation. Unity Air had made headlines, but what came next wasn't a headline. It was an earthquake. While Flight 217 cruised above the Atlantic internal systems, processed one final data package. One that had been decrypted and reconstructed by Quantum Core's AI engine from fragments recovered during Ethan Pierce's desperate terminal wipe. The file's title read, simply, Project Buffer, Confidential Strategy Brief, Horizon Star, Legal Risk Division. Aisha read it first. She went silent. Then she handed the tablet to Isaiah. He read the document, slowly, jaw-tightening eyes narrowing with each paragraph. Buffer wasn't just an HR term. It was a multi-departmental operation quietly initiated 2 years ago to suppress bias-related complaints. Profile high-risk employees and passengers and escalate nuisance reports directly to legal before they could become headlines. The operation was designed not to correct injustice, but to contain it. Isaiah's voice was steady as he spoke. Aisha, confirm metadata. Is this authentic, cross-referenced with 4 known systems? She replied. Originated from Horizon Star's compliance team. Last edit was 8 days before this flight. Danielle leaned in, reading the section headings aloud. Tiered suppression protocols. Passenger profile. Risk matrix. PPRM. Crew behavioral prediction tracker. Whistleblower. Delay chain. She blinked. They weren't just reacting to complaints. They were predicting who might complain next and preparing to silence them. Aisha added, names were tagged. Risk levels assigned. Danielle, you were flagged as a Tier 2 uplift risk, meaning too smart, too observant, too vocal. Danielle sat back stunned. Isaiah asked, how deep does it go? Aisha scrolled. Internal comms between Richard Vaughn, Ethan Pierce, and the Chief Risk Officer, Mark Hollings. He signed off on everything. And here's the final kicker. Claire Donovan wasn't rogue. She was executing from script. Isaiah's silence was deafening. Javier Morales, sensing the weight, turned off his live stream for the first time since the flight began. You want to handle this off camera? Isaiah shook his head. No, the world deserves to see what corruption looks like when it hides behind structure. He tapped his watch. Nadia. Secure channel. Go live. Within seconds, Unity Air's global feed went live with a single screen, final systems review. Aisha uploaded the Buffer document with a formal summary. Operation Buffer was a deliberate systemic framework to profile, suppress, and erase dissent rooted in equity-related complaints. This operation violated FAA ethics codes, federal privacy laws, and international civil rights guidelines. Isaiah spoke into the mic. My name is Dr. Isaiah Grant. I was flagged in this document as a Tier 1 escalation risk. It said I was to be quietly isolated, digitally monitored, and removed at the earliest justifiable opportunity. Unquote. Today, I sit here as the man who exposed them, and this is their blueprint. The broadcast reached over 2 million viewers in under 20 minutes. Airline unions across Europe and North America called emergency meetings. Federal regulators filed motions to subpoena Horizon Star's former leadership. Senator Adrian Bell issued a televised statement. Project Buffer is the institutional face of modern-day discrimination, subtle, hidden, and intentionally buried, but no longer. Meanwhile, Mark Hollings, former chief risk officer, was tracked by reporters leaving a private airport in Denver. He refused to comment. His legal team issued a blanket denial. It didn't matter. The document had dates, logs, signatures, and more damning than anything, it had patterns. Javier resumed streaming. What you're seeing, people, isn't about one flight anymore. It's about every form you filled out that never got answered, every complaint that got lost, every apology email you received with no action behind it. Unity Air didn't just buy a company, they unearthed its rot. Danielle turned to Isaiah. We just made it impossible for any airline to pretend they didn't know. He nodded. That was the goal. Then came the final message on the Unity Air feed. Unity Archive. Now live, full Buffer files, declassified, searchable by name. Flight incident or suppressed report. ID. Accountability is now public. Transparency is permanent. Within hours, former Horizon Star employees began checking the archive. Some cried. Some posted confessions. Others shared stories they'd never dared put in writing, now confirmed by metadata. By the time Flight 217 began its descent, Unity Air had completed the single largest act of data liberation in airline history. No leaks, no paywalls, no denials, just exposure. And the reckoning was no longer theoretical. It was active. No champagne, no spotlight, no victory lap. As Unity Air Flight 217 descended over the coastline, Isaiah Grant sat in silence. Around him, the cabin was calm, charged with something deeper than celebration. Not triumph, but transformation. He hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't demanded applause, and yet the world was already standing. Aisha looked over from her seat. FAA just acknowledged the Unity archive as a protected historical record. No one can alter or delete it. It's permanent. Isaiah nodded eyes on the window, watching the clouds part. Danielle stepped into the aisle, gently adjusting her newly assigned badge, Director of Cabin Equity and Culture. She didn't walk differently. She didn't smile wider. But her energy, her presence had changed. Not performative. Earned. Javier Morales had stopped live streaming. Not because the moment was over, but because it was complete. "There's nothing more to say," he whispered to his assistant in the seat behind. The story told itself. In the row ahead, Captain Robert Ames sat forward, laptop closed. "The real ones," he murmured to no one in particular, "don't walk off planes to applause. They walk off having fixed something that was broken." As the aircraft lined up for final approach, the Unity airfeed displayed one last message: "Welcome home, Unity 217. You didn't just land. You arrived." The passengers didn't cheer. Instead, many simply nodded. Quiet hands found armrests. Eyes turned to the window. Some whispered to neighbors. Others, like Rosalind in row 9C, simply placed a hand to her heart and exhaled. In the cockpit, Captain Annika Tran guided the aircraft with expert precision, her hand steady, her voice calm. Behind her, a printed version of the Unity Air Charter hung on the wall beside the autopilot. The ground control tower welcomed them with a respectful Unity 217 cleared to land. "And sir, welcome to a new era." No excitement, just affirmation. The wheels touched down without ceremony. No drama, no forced claps. Isaiah closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the vibration of landing gear reuniting with Earth. In that moment, it was done. The revolution had already happened without noise. Danielle stood again and made a final cabin announcement, her voice clear and centered. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Miami. You've just completed the inaugural flight of Unity Air. This journey was more than distance. It was direction. We thank you not for witnessing history, but for participating in it." As passengers gathered their belongings, a message appeared on all personal screens. "Your voice changed aviation today. Would you like to nominate a future equity leader? Submit anonymous crew feedback. Volunteer to mentor new flyers. View Unity's public audit plan." Nearly every passenger selected one. In row 4D, a man who had once quietly filmed the first moments of injustice now approached Isaiah and simply said, "I'll never board a plane the same way again. Thank you." Isaiah replied, "Don't thank me. Just keep your phone out next time." Then came a small surprise. Rosalind, the deaf passenger, stepped forward. She tapped her tablet, then turned the screen toward Isaiah. It read, "When I couldn't speak, the system ignored me. Today, the system spoke for me. You made that possible. I don't have words, but I have respect." Isaiah bowed his head gently. That was all he needed. As the cabin doors opened, sunlight poured in, not dramatic, just warm. Ground crew stood ready. Some knew what had happened, some didn't. But none stopped Isaiah as he stepped off the aircraft, not because they were afraid, but because they understood. This wasn't someone you stopped. It was someone you followed. Aisha walked beside him, tablet tucked under her arm. "You're trending in 94 countries," she said. He didn't answer. "You know the media's going to want interviews, headlines, features." He kept walking. Danielle caught up. "They'll probably offer you a book deal by Thursday." Isaiah turned to them both and said the only thing he needed to let the system speak: "We've already said enough." Behind them, the Unity Air logo gleamed on the side of the aircraft. No gold trim, no platinum eagle, no corporate slogan. Just 3 words beneath it: dignity, equity, visibility. Passengers exited with quiet hands on shoulders. Some hugged, some nodded. Others simply walked differently. Javier filmed the disembarkation without narration. His final caption read, "Sometimes revolution whispers. This one flew." 3 days after Flight 217 touched down. A quiet ripple of reform became a global undercurrent, not through banners, not through protests, but through policy, through leadership, through legacy. At Unity Air headquarters in Miami, the office walls were still bare on purpose. Isaiah Grant refused portraits, bronze plaques, or founder tributes. Instead, the first thing guests saw upon entering the lobby was a live interactive display of Unity's real-time equity tracker. 4 numbers constantly refreshed. Passenger bias reports reviewed in 24 hours. Crew evaluations anonymized and published quarterly. Public audit transparency rating, 98.7%. New mentorship signups, 12,642 globally. Isaiah stood at the far end of the hall, watching the numbers like a pilot watches altitude. Danielle approached with 2 binders in her hands. One marked, reinstated crew, the other, mentorship candidates, approved. She set them on the table. These are real people, Isaiah. People who watched what happened and said, "Let me be part of it." Not because of perks, but because of purpose. He smiled slightly. That's the difference. That's what survives. Meanwhile, in schools across the country, media studies professors were analyzing the live stream of Flight 217. Law students debated the legality of Project Buffer. Activists referenced Unity Air's documentation process as a case study in institutional overhaul. In one high school auditorium, a student read aloud to her class, "My name is Jada. And last month I watched my mom cry after a gate agent humiliated her. But then I saw Unity Air. I saw someone fight back. So I started a club, Seat 6A Society. Not to get revenge, but to never forget." At the White House, a closed-door policy session was held to review the FAA's current ethics standards. For the first time in 20 years, regulators requested input from passengers, not just executives. And sitting at the front of that session, uninvited but impossible to ignore, was a printed version of Unity Air's Charter of Dignity. Isaiah hadn't spoken to the press. He hadn't given a single interview. When CNN requested an exclusive sit-down, he declined. When Forbes emailed asking for a Man of the Year feature, he deleted it. Aisha asked him why. He replied, "I'm not the story. The system is." Instead, he focused on the Unity Fund, now grown to $14.3 million, thanks to donations from passengers, former crew, and corporate leaders whose eyes had finally opened. The fund was now granting aviation scholarships to underrepresented youth conflict resolution training for airport security and restorative justice programs for wrongfully disciplined staff. Danielle led the first workshop personally. "It's not about punishment," she told them. "It's about visibility." Systems fail when people are invisible. In the hangars, new Unity airplanes were being repainted. No gold accents, no elite crests. Just 3 vertical lines beneath every tail number, 1 for dignity, 1 for equity, 1 for memory. Memory mattered most. That's why the Unity archive remained live, uncensored, fully searchable. Every entry from Project Buffer, every suppressed complaint, every time-stamped file. Victims could now find validation. Whistleblowers could find vindication. And the industry could no longer pretend ignorance. Isaiah's legacy wasn't power. It was permanence. Not in dominance, but in structure. In protocol. In ethics coded into operations so deeply that no executive could quietly dismantle them. 1 week after the flight, a Unity airplane took off from Nairobi carrying its first class of sponsored Unity scholars. The cabin crew read aloud a new script before departure, "Welcome aboard. This flight is operated by Unity Air, where your presence is not privilege, it's principle. We see you, we hear you, and we exist because of you." In the back row, a 16-year-old girl named Nia whispered to her seatmate, "One day, I'll sit in 6A." At that moment, Isaiah was already in another airport, watching from afar. Cap low coat collar turned up. He wasn't flying today. He was listening. He watched as a black father checked in with his daughter, as a flight attendant helped an elderly Korean woman without prompting, As a white teenager let a hijabi woman board ahead of her without the gate agent needing to interfere. He smiled faintly. The systems had shifted. The culture was catching up. And the legacy was no longer in his hands. It had found thousands more. Months passed. Seasons changed. But one thing didn't. The system stayed open. Unity Air became more than an airline. It became a standard. Not because it was perfect, but because it refused to pretend imperfection was acceptable. Every quarter, the Unity Archive released its bias audit to the public. Every time a complaint was submitted, passengers could track its resolution. And every new hire from pilot to baggage handler signed a visible ethics agreement not buried in HR folders, but displayed on their ID badges. Other airlines were forced to follow not out of inspiration, but out of survival. Seat 6A became a symbol in aviation, a seat not of luxury, but of accountability. And wherever Unity Air flew, passengers boarded differently. Eyes met, bias lowered. Kindness wasn't a courtesy, it was culture. But Isaiah Grant never returned to the center stage. He declined awards, declined keynote speeches. Instead, he traveled not in first class, not with press, but in silence. Observing, listening. At a small regional airport in Arkansas, he helped a new agent set up a feedback tablet. She didn't know who he was. "You volunteer for Unity?" she asked. "No," he replied. "I build what it stands on." In a Nairobi classroom, a boy asked his mentor, who made Unity Air. The mentor replied, "Someone who knew the truth didn't need to shout. It needed to be structured." In a church in Georgia, a pastor used Isaiah's story not as a parable of revenge, but of restoration. He didn't just claim justice, he preached. He engineered it, so the next soul wouldn't have to. And on the anniversary of Flight 217, Unity Air did not host a press event. Instead, they lit 3 lanterns on the runway, one for everyone who'd been silenced, one for everyone who stood up anyway, and one for everyone who's still waiting to be seen. Isaiah stood at a distance watching them lift into the night sky. Aisha stepped beside him. "You really think it'll last, it will?" he said. "Not because of me, but because people finally saw what structure without empathy creates, and they won't let it grow again." Danielle walked over with a message. "From the new equity officer at Global Pacific Airlines," she said. "They want to license our training platform, and they're requesting to name it after Seat 6A. Isaiah paused, then nodded once. "Let them, but make sure they mean it." As the lights disappeared into the sky, Javier Morales published his final documentary edit, The Seat That Couldn't Be Taken. It opened with Isaiah being denied 6A and ended with passengers stepping into flights bearing badges that read, "We don't serve seats. We serve people." Unity Air didn't just survive. It redefined survival. It proved that systems can be built to protect, not just to perform. That ethics don't have to be inspirational speeches, but lines of code clauses and contracts and checks that always run, especially when no one's watching. And that dignity, once woven into structure, doesn't need a microphone. It just needs to stay. Isaiah left no statue, no autobiography, no CEO emeritus title. But in every gate agent who spoke up, every child who saw someone who looked like them in uniform, every employee who no longer feared retaliation for doing what was right, he remained. The man who didn't wait for a seat at the table. He rewrote the flight plan, so others could fly without fear. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.